very much part of what they say is a big fight back and a huge tactical miscalculation by President Putin's invading force in the country of Ukraine. Let's get you some of the other big defining images on day 4 of what's happening in Ukraine as part of this invasion. Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, amidst heavy shelling that's been taking place there. Ukraine claims that Russian forces blew up this gas pipeline in the city, prompting the government to warn people to protect themselves at this time, like I just said. Image number 2 that we're bringing to you, Ukraine continues to fight. Another big image on your screen of armed forces destroying the enemy's war weapons. A tank caught in a massive fire after shelling. An armored vehicle looks to be on fire after what the Ukrainian government claims was an attack on a Russian convoy. The third big image, the aftermath of the siege of the city of Kharkiv. Heavy shelling taking place in the second largest Ukrainian urban center. The Russian army's light vehicles claim to have been damaged in a Ukrainian assault. Several light armored vehicles apparently smashed by Ukrainian troops. That's what they are claiming. Let's now take you to the Chernihiv region of northern Ukraine in a show of bravery. This video going super viral on Ukrainian social media. Police along with local residents appearing to stop a convoy of Russian tanks. Residents seen lining up, making a human wall of sorts, tank convoy from entering their city. We cannot independently corroborate these videos, but they are being released officially from Ukraine. And amidst heavy shelling in the capital city, Kyiv, images on your screen show an oil tank that has caught fire after a targeted attack. It could have been a missile or a rocket, we're not sure, but an energy facility on fire about 40 kilometers outside Kyiv. The next big image is from the city of Bucha, which is within the Kyiv Oblast area, the part of the Kyiv metropolitan area. Shows a 9-story residential building on fire after it was hit by a Russian rocket or missile. Casualties, unfortunately, not known at this point of time. We'll try and get you more information on that.
Its airspace to Russian planes, joining other European countries in ramping up sanctions against Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. Finland, which shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Russia, said it is prepared to close its airspace to Russian air traffic. After Meta's Facebook, now Alphabet Inc.'s Google has taken action against Russian media. Google has blocked Russia's RT app downloads on Ukrainian territory. Google had earlier barred RT and other channels from receiving money for ads on their websites, apps and YouTube videos, similar to a move by Facebook after the invasion of Ukraine. The once vibrant European capital, Kyiv, is living under a blanket curfew right now. The residents have been asked to stay off their own streets. A blast was heard to the west of the Kyiv city center. This came minutes after an air raid siren was rung. The regional chief says that there is intense fighting ongoing. Overnight, Russian forces pounded the capital with artillery and cruise missiles. In the dead of the night, streets were left empty. This was in contrast to the columns of vehicles choking roads in recent days. Tens of thousands of residents fled Kyiv and continue to do so in hope of escaping the aggression. And those still in Kyiv took shelter in an underground car parking. Officials issued warnings to residents to stay away from windows and take precautions to avoid flying debris and bullets. But despite these circumstances, the will to defeat Russia remains strong in Kyiv.
Ну, все под контролем. Под каким-то контролем. Все у нас хорошо, ну, все должно быть хорошо. Наши войска справляются.
it's really good atmosphere because it's really very, very warm people, so close to each other because we help each other.
In the last couple of nights, many have taken shelter in basements, underground parking, garages and subway stations. Russia claims its assault on Ukraine is aimed only at military targets, but reports say that bridges, schools and residential buildings have also come under attack. Western leaders urged Vladimir Putin to choose the path of diplomacy, but after Kremlin ordered its troops to barge into its neighboring country, diplomacy took a back seat. Kyiv says it is open to dialogue, but not in Belarus, as Minsk was complicit in the Russian invasion.
Сейчас много новостей о возможных переговорах Украины и России, которые могут закончить.
There's a lot of news about possible talks between Ukraine and Russia, which can end this war and bring peace back to all of us. Your capital, Minsk, is often mentioned there as the platform for these talks. It's the platform that we didn't choose, and neither did you, in fact. It was chosen by Russian authorities.
А выбирало руководство России. Если бы с вашей территории не было агрессивных действий, мы могли бы говорить в Минске.
If there wasn't aggressive actions from your territory, we could have talked in Minsk, in your capital. When you were neutral, we talked in Minsk. Met many times. It's a right and honest way to talk as neighbors to each other.
По-соседски. Разговаривать нам.
In a statement, Russian Defense Ministry said that due to this rejection, Moscow ordered to broaden its offensives from all directions.
Вчера, после заявлений киевского режима о готовности к переговорам, активные боевые действия на основных направлениях операции были приостановлены. После того, как украинская сторона отказалась от переговорного процесса, сегодня всем подразделениям был отдан приказ о развитии наступления на всех направлениях в соответствии с планом проведения операции.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister has called on the International Red Cross to help repatriate bodies of Russian soldiers.
We ask the International Red Cross to help us repatriate the bodies of Russian soldiers to Russia. There are thousands of invaders' bodies. This is a humanitarian need. And we ask the invaders to leave Ukrainian territory and go back to Russia. We call upon Russians again to make it that there are less bodies of your sons, of your men, otherwise there will be thousands of them. I say it again, victory will be ours.
До росіян. Зробіть так, щоб тіл ваших синів.
Well, for more on this, we earlier spoke to Russian affairs expert Fred Ware from Moscow, and this is what he had to say about the situation in Ukraine.
Well, it's already perfectly clear that it doesn't work to deter Russia. And in point of fact, for 8 years, Russia has been going through this experience of escalating sanctions, and a lot of sanctions have been applied, and Russia has so far managed to adjust to them. It's certainly built up huge financial resources, record high currency reserves, for example. It's instituted import substitution. Lots and lots of strategic planning has gone into preparing Russia for the sanctions that are coming on now. Some of the sanctions, the new sanctions, are serious, especially about Russian banks. Anything that will cut off Russia's connections, financial connections to the world, will hurt Russia.
As Russian troops continue to unleash their assault on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, West is ramping up measures to impose more sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy. In the latest, Western allies have now agreed on a new list of financial sanctions against Moscow. European Union has proposed banishing a number of Russian banks from the SWIFT interbank system. With this, the West will ensure that these Russian banks are disconnected from the international financial system. The allies have also agreed to impose restrictive measures to prevent the Russian central bank from deploying its international reserves. Adding on to this, Affluent Russians connected to Putin's government will also no longer be allowed to use the golden passport system to obtain European citizenship. Speaking in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said EU and other Western powers, including the US and UK, are aiming to cripple President Vladimir Putin's war machine.
As Russian forces unleash their assault on Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, we are resolved to continue imposing massive costs on Russia, costs that will further isolate Russia from the international financial system and our economies. In coordination with President Biden, President Macron, Bundeskanzler Scholz and Prime Minister Draghi, as well as Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Johnson, we considered a significant tightening of our international response. The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine.
French naval troops, meanwhile, have intercepted a Russia-bound cargo vessel in the Channel immediately after EU approved these new set of sanctions. The Russian-flagged Baltic leader, which had set sail from the French city of Rouen, was escorted to the port of Boulogne-Sama by the French forces. It is suspected to belong to a company targeted by EU sanctions. Let's cross over to Germany, where Chancellor Olaf Scholz is currently addressing a special parliament session in Berlin.
Diese neue Realität erfordert eine klare Antwort. Wir haben sie gegeben. Wie Sie wissen, haben wir gestern entschieden, dass Deutschland der Ukraine Waffen zur Verteidigung des Landes liefern wird. Auf Putins Aggression konnte es keine andere Antwort geben. Meine Damen und Herren, unser zweiter Handlungsauftrag ist, Putin von seinem Kriegskurs abzubringen. Der Krieg ist eine Katastrophe für die Ukraine, aber der Krieg wird sich auch als Katastrophe für Russland erweisen. Gemeinsam mit den EU- und Staats- und Regierungschefs haben wir ein Sanktionspaket von bisher ungekanntem Ausmaß verabschiedet. Wir schneiden russische Banken und Staatsunternehmen von der Finanzierung ab. Wir verhindern den Export von Zukunftstechnologie nach Russland. Wir nehmen die Oligarchen und ihre Geldanlagen in der EU ins Visier. Hinzu kommen die Strafmaßnahmen gegen Putin und Personen in seinem direkten Umfeld und Einschränkungen bei der Visavergabe für russische Offizielle. Und wir schließen wichtige russische Banken vom Bankenkommunikationsnetz SWIFT aus. Darauf haben wir uns gestern mit den Staats- und Regierungschefs des wirtschaftlich stärksten Demokratien der EU verständigt. Machen wir uns nichts vor. Putin wird seinen Kurs nicht über Nacht ändern. Doch schon sehr bald wird die russische Führung spüren, welch hohen Preis sie bezahlt. Allein in der letzten Woche haben russische Börsenwerte um über 30% nachgegeben. Das zeigt, unsere Sanktionen wirken. Und wir behalten uns weitere Sanktionen vor, ohne irgendwelche Denkverbote. Unsere Richtschnur bleibt die Frage, was trifft die Verantwortlichen am härtesten? Die, um die es geht, und nicht das russische Volk. Denn Putin, nicht das russische Volk, hat sich für den Krieg entschieden. Deshalb gehört es deutlich ausgesprochen, dieser Krieg ist Putins Krieg.
Well, that is German Chancellor Olaf Scholz addressing a special parliament session in Berlin on the ongoing Ukraine crisis. Now, in an attempt to counter Russian troops in Ukraine, U.S. President Joe Biden has now signed an order to provide $350 million in military aid to Kyiv. The development comes as Russian forces continue to march forward to siege the Ukrainian capital and overthrow Zelensky's government. The aid will also include Javelin anti-tank weapons. This is the third time that Biden has used his presidential authority to send emergency security assistance from U.S. stockpiles to Ukraine. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, meanwhile, has said that his country will provide lethal aid to Ukraine through NATO partners to support its troops in this fight against the Russian military.
We are already providing significant support in terms of non-lethal aid, but I've just spoken with the Defence Minister and we'll be seeking to provide whatever support we can for lethal aid through our NATO partners, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, and we'll be working through those channels because that's the most effective way to do it. They are already providing support in these areas and we will be assisting them with what they are doing.
Other countries, including Germany, have also announced decision to provide military assistance to Kyiv, while France has pledged to send more military equipment as well as fuel to Ukraine to help fight off the Russian invasion. Our next report gets you all the details. Take a look.
President Joe Biden on Friday instructed the U.S. State Department to release up to an additional $350 million worth of weapons from U.S. stocks to Ukraine, as the country struggles to push back a Russian invasion. In a memorandum to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Biden directed that $350 million allocated through the Foreign Assistance Act be designated for Ukraine's defense. This marks the third time that the United States has drawn from its weapons to supply Ukraine, after doing so in the fall of 2021 and then again in December. Blinken on Saturday called the third authorization unprecedented. Over the past year, the United States has committed more than $1 billion to security assistance to Ukraine, Blinken said. Ukraine has been asking for Javelin anti-tank weapons and Stinger missiles to shoot down aircraft. Other nations have pledged military material to Kyiv, as Ukraine's military fights against an invading Russian force. The Netherlands will supply 200 Stinger air defense rockets, while Belgium has pledged 2,000 machine guns and 3,800 tons of fuel. France has decided to send defensive military equipment, while adding that the issue of sending offensive arms was still under consideration.
Club world champions and Champions League holders Chelsea face Liverpool tonight in the final of the EFL Cup, with the club in turmoil. Owner Roman Abramovich has attempted to distance the club from the backlash of Russia's invasion of Ukraine by relinquishing day-to-day control. Abramovich is one of Russia's wealthiest individuals and has been considered close to Russian President Vladimir Putin. There have been calls from British politicians for Abramovich to be sanctioned as part of the measures adopted by the British government in response to the invasion of Ukraine. In what is being seen as a move to preempt any problems for the club, Abramovich has handed over the stewardship and care of Chelsea to the trustees of the club's charitable trust. In a statement that did not reference the invasion of Ukraine, Abramovich said the decision was keeping in mind the best interests of the club. Chelsea are not for sale, and the $2 billion loan given to the club by Abramovich is not being called in. Abramovich bought Chelsea in 2004, and his investment has seen the club win 2 Champions League titles, 5 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups, the Europa League twice, and a maiden Club World Cup title last month. Artists from the world of art, culture and music are using their creative mediums to speak against the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. They all want the same thing: for the war to end and peace to prevail. Maxim Chmerkovsky says he's safe, but the situation in Ukraine is pretty dire. The Ukrainian-born dancer shared videos from a location in the city of Kyiv where he is taking shelter while the Russian invasion of Ukraine continues. Maxim said he wasn't currently thinking of making any attempts to leave the country. Earlier, he posted a video from his balcony in the capital city as sirens rang out in the streets hours after Russia launched a wide-ranging attack on the country. Hollywood star Sean Penn, who is in Ukraine filming a documentary about Russia's invasion, released a statement after appearing at a press briefing in the capital of Kyiv, where he listened to government officials talk about the crisis. The actor said, and we quote, "Already a brutal mistake of lives taken and hearts broken. And if he doesn't relent, I believe Mr. Putin will have made a most horrible mistake for all of humankind." President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people have risen as historic symbols of courage and principle. Ukraine is the tip of the spear of the democratic embrace of dreams. If we allow it to fight alone, our soul as America is lost. End of quote. Russia will be barred from the final of this year's Eurovision Song Contest. The organizer said after Ukraine and several other European public broadcasters had called for the country to be expelled. Finland said it would not send contestants to the final if Russia was allowed to participate. Public broadcasters in Ukraine, Sweden, Denmark and the Netherlands, Lithuania and Norway had all urged the EBU to expel Russia. The Eurovision final, one of the world's largest televised events that will take place in Italy, Russia has not yet announced an entrant for this splashy contest. That's the latest at this hour. You are watching We On Wild as One. The coverage on the Ukraine crisis continues. My name is Eric Njoka. Stay with us.
अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक। गो मैकेनिक। अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक। गो मैकेनिक।
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
It says that it's likely to miss by about.
What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
One ship was able to freeze global trading.
a traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest that once grew where there is now a desert.
You have ignored us in the past and you will ignore us again. We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
Show us your faithfulness. Show us your trustworthiness. Show us your honesty. Prove us wrong. We desperately need you to prove us wrong. God help us all if you fail to prove us wrong. God help us.
$1 trillion species, 7.8 billion humans, 1.9 million species extinct, one planet. Where are we heading? What should we do? Watch.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Heen Korsara and I continue to bring you all the latest from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Let's start by looking at the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin addresses special forces, thanks them for fulfilling what he calls their heroic duty in Ukraine. Ukraine rejects Russia's offer to hold talks in Belarus, citing that Minsk is itself complicit in the Russian invasion. But President Zelensky has left the door open for negotiations in other locations.
They're targeting military airports around the city, and they were trying to capture the Hostomel airport north of the city. And the major battle.
Ukrainian parliament member confirms to WION that Russia is trying to infiltrate Kiev from all sides and to capture Kiev's airport to aid troop movement. Ukrainian officials report Russian troops have breached the walls and entered the city of Kharkiv. According to reports, Ukrainian forces are battling Russian troops on the streets of Ukraine's northeastern city. Moscow claims to have besieged two big cities in Ukraine. Russia claims it has entirely besieged Kherson and Berdyansk in southern regions of Ukraine. Western allies announced new set of economic sanctions against Russia. Europe will remove certain Russian banks from the SWIFT interbank system. European Union mulls additional sanctions against Russia. European Union finance ministers to discuss a bloc-wide ban on Russian flights and could be a part of a fresh package of sanctions on Moscow. Today is the fourth day since Russia launched its offensive against Ukraine. Before we begin with the details, let's just quickly get you the top developments at this hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin thanked his country's special forces for fulfilling their heroic duty in Ukraine. Speaking in the parliament, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Germany will be supplying weapons to Ukraine. He added that the war is not a catastrophe for just Ukraine, but all of Europe. Speaking on sanctions, Scholz also said that Putin will not change his actions overnight, but will feel the high price soon. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected a Russian offer of talks in Belarus. Zelensky said that Minsk was itself complicit in the Russian invasion. Ukraine, however, has left the door open for negotiations in other locations. Ukrainian officials have also called Russia's offer for talks in Belarus propaganda. Zelensky has hailed the assistance Ukraine was receiving from its international allies. As Russia's invading forces pressed on with their assault, Zelensky in a video address said that the country is already receiving weapons, medicine, food, diesel and money from its allies, who formed an anti-war coalition. The Ukrainian president urged the world to scrap Russia's voting power at the UN Security Council. He said Russia's actions verged on genocide. Streets in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev remain eerily deserted after Russia intensified the attack on Ukraine. Earlier today, citizens hunkered down in homes, underground garages, subway stations in anticipation of a full-scale assault by Russian forces. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Moscow was bombarding residential areas. Heavy gun battle has been underway in Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces are attempting to block Russian troops who have broken into the city center. Armored military vehicles and tanks were seen entering Kharkiv as well. Military trucks with the letter Z painted on their sides could be seen on residential areas. Finland and Denmark said that they would close their airspace to Russian planes, joining other European countries in ramping up sanctions against Moscow over its invasion of Ukraine. After Meta's Facebook, now Alphabet Inc.'s Google has taken action against Russian media. Google has blocked Russia's RT app downloads on Ukrainian territory. Google had earlier barred RT and other channels from receiving money for ads on their websites, apps and YouTube videos, similar to a move by Facebook after the invasion of Ukraine. Now, of course, governments across the globe are working round the clock to repatriate their nationals from Ukraine to safety. Some are coordinating with the neighbouring embassies to help cross the borders. Others, like India, have launched an evacuation operation to bring them back. 2 flights are expected to depart from Bucharest. They have, in fact, and as we speak, an Air India flight carrying 240 Indians has taken off from Budapest towards Indira Gandhi International Airport in Delhi. This is the 3rd such flight to reach India under Operation Ganga. The 2nd flight from Romania landed in Delhi on Sunday morning, that is today morning, early morning. 250 Indian nationals were on board. Union Civil Aviation Minister and Minister of State for External Affairs welcomed them at the airport. The first flight carrying Indians evacuated from Ukraine landed in the financial capital Mumbai on Saturday evening. They were welcomed by Union Minister Piyush Goyal at the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport. The Air India plane, which had taken off from Bucharest, brought home 219 passengers, mostly students. Upon receiving the students, Union Minister Piyush Goyal said, and I'm quoting here, "Glad to see the smiles on the faces of Indians safely evacuated from Ukraine at the Mumbai airport."
Be patient. Today the Honorable Prime Minister spoke to the Ukrainian President also and requested him to keep all Indians safe and secure, to provide safe passage to all your colleagues who are still there.
Under India's evacuation mission Operation Ganga, another flight carrying Indian evacuees is also taken off. New Delhi has urged all the nationals not to move to any of the border posts without prior coordination with the Indian officials. The latest statement says that the situation at many checkpoints is extremely sensitive. The Indian government is working closely with Poland, Slovakia, Romania to ensure safe return of its citizens. But according to officials, it is becoming increasingly difficult to help nationals cross over to other nations. Everyone has been advised to stay calm and use their limited supplies of food, water and medicines wisely. Vaccine certificate or a negative COVID report is mandatory to enter India, but the government has decided to exempt those fleeing from Ukraine. The decision has been taken on humanitarian grounds. The first flight that was carrying Indians evacuated from Ukraine landed in the financial capital Mumbai on Saturday evening. They were welcomed by the Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Under India's evacuation mission Operation Ganga, another flight carrying Indian evacuees took off from Bucharest then. Now, New Delhi has urged all nationals not to move to any of the border posts without prior coordination with Indian officials, as a lot of the checkpoints here are extremely sensitive. The situation there is extremely sensitive. The Indian government is, of course, working very closely with Poland, Slovakia, Romania to ensure safe return of the citizens. But at this point, moving Indians across the border is becoming difficult. Everyone has been advised to stay calm. They've been advised to use their limited supplies of food, water and medicines judiciously. And New Delhi has urged all citizens not to move to any of the border posts without prior coordination with Indian officials. This is under India's evacuation mission, which is called Operation Ganga. Now, for more updates on this, we're being joined live by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal. Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just bring us up to speed with the evacuation operation so far?
Well, Well, when it comes to the evacuation, more flights are expected from countries like Romania and Hungary, where there are a number of Indian nationals who have crossed the border. And from there, the Indian missions are working overtime and, of course, 24/7 to make sure that the nationals get the flights. But talking about the development that has happened last few minutes is that the Polish envoy here in Delhi has announced that the Indian nationals who are coming to his country from Ukraine will not need any kind of Polish visas. That's significant relief for these Indian nationals who are, of course, now in desperate situation given the worrisome situation on the ground in Ukraine. So this is a big relief for the Indian nationals crossing over to Poland from the Ukrainian border. So yesterday we know that the Polish envoy spoke to Beyond and talked about how Warsaw is supporting New Delhi in the entire effort.
Right, absolutely. Of course, the priority right now is to have Indian nationals come back to India and be safe. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke to Ukrainian President Zelensky over the same issues. Like I mentioned earlier, the situation at the checkpoints remains extremely sensitive. What is being done for that?
Well, as I was talking about the checkpoints, the biggest problem with the checkpoints is the number of people who are reaching there. It's just not the Indian nationals, but a lot of Ukrainians who are crossing over the border as refugees, and of course other foreign nationals as well. So the biggest worry was regarding the visa, and that is why the announcement by the Polish envoy is a significant development. Now, talking about what's going to happen in the next few hours, there will be a major pre-see by the Indian Foreign Secretary here in Delhi, where, of course, Beyond will be present. And when it comes to the details, the Indian Foreign Secretary will be giving all the details required when it comes to Operation Ganga, which involves evacuation of the Indian nationals.
All right. Siddhant, also going forward, what sort of a role do you see India playing? As we know, India has taken a neutral stance. It's kept the doors of diplomacy open and has kept the chance of returning back to the negotiating table open. How do you assess this?
Well, today will be an important day because there is an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. Now, this session is important because it will go through or undertake a vote on whether the United Nations General Assembly should meet and discuss the Ukraine crisis. Now, this meeting cannot be vetoed by any country because this is a procedural vote. So, two things will be something that will be important to note. The Indian stance, because so far India has abstained, and of course the Russian stance as well, because Russia, of course, will not be happy with this development.
Right. Also, Siddhant, just for more clarity, now in some updates just coming in, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has said that all Indians stranded in Ukraine will be brought back to the country at the government's expense, and that they have decided to increase the number of flights to neighbouring countries of Ukraine with their permission for this purpose. What do you know about this?
Well, last week the Indian government had said that when it comes to the evacuation, it will be paid. The entire flight, the cost of the flight will be borne by the Indian government. So this is a reiteration by the Indian Defence Minister regarding the charges. But when it comes to bringing the Indian nationals back, we know that the Indian government, the Indian envoys, a number of statements which have been made have said that till the point that the last Indian is there in Ukraine, the Indian government will make sure to bring them back. In fact, yesterday, the Indian envoy to Romania, when he was bidding farewell to the Indians who are coming from that country to India, the evacuated Indians, he talked about it and gave a very enthusiastic speech talking about how the Indian government will make sure that all the Indian students are brought back as soon as possible.
Right. All right, Siddhant, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates on that. Now, Ukraine is under attack. Russian troops undeterred. Ukraine citizens have been asked to help fight the enemy. Men aged 18 to 60 were asked to stay back. Their families packed whatever they could carry on their backs to seek shelter across the borders, mainly in Romania, Poland and Moldova. Here's a look at what this perilous journey entails. These are the residents of Ukraine, leaving their homes as Russian troops move deeper into the country. With little on their backs on a perilous journey, trying to cross over to Poland in search of shelter and security. This miles-long queue is made up of scared individuals. Anxious mothers, children who are too young to understand what is happening, hoping to escape missile strikes, bombing, hoping to never have to wake up to air raid sirens, and to never bear witness to the panic and commotion sparked off by Russian military operations. It's a long wait, 6 to 12 hours, but what other options do they have?
Because of martial law, all military obliged, all men must fight for the country, for peace, to prevent attacks from enemy forces, and for everything to be all right. We and children must leave Ukraine.
In just 48 hours, some 50,000 residents fled the country. The UN Refugee Agency has requested neighboring countries to keep their borders open. Around 5 million are at the risk of being displaced. Across the border, Polish residents rush to assist Ukrainians. Moldova, on the other hand, set up special humanitarian centers with medical staff and social workers, all set to assist displaced Ukrainians and provide basic humanitarian, legal and food aid. And then we have Romania, that witnessed an influx from 6 different checkpoints. As per the border police, the inflow is up by 120%. While some plan to huddle till they have more clarity, others plan to continue their journey to other European nations. These border crossings have witnessed several tough goodbyes over the last few days, and that is a gross understatement, with many forced to leave behind their husbands, fathers and brothers.
Where are you going? Where will you go?
Do you have a place to sleep? Poland.
Your husband, where is he?
Ukraine.
He managed to live or not?
Increasing proxy wars in the recent years have set a trend in rising forced displacement. The number stands at a whopping 84 million worldwide. The invasion in Ukraine is only going to make things worse. Ukraine's location on the globe is a big reason for its vulnerable state. The western border is the only flank which does not share a border with Russia or its allies. So it's natural that innocent civilians are fleeing towards the European Union borders in countries like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and Romania. The UN refugee body says that since the last 3 days, 150,000 Ukrainian refugees have already crossed into neighboring countries. Let's just get you the visuals from the Polish border city, where fearful families throng to evade shelling. Among the people fleeing Ukraine, at least half are going to Poland. The government has reserved about 70,000 hospital beds for those who are wounded and has arranged a train to transport the injured from Ukraine. Moving on to Slovakia, where charity workers and locals are helping incoming Ukrainian refugees. Over the past 24 hours, 10,500 people have entered from the border. Governor of the Eastern region said that the situation was getting worse every hour.
Tá situácia sa každou hodinou ako keby zhoršovala, čo sa týka počtu ľudí. Postupne začína tá štruktúra tých utečencov, vlastne vojnových utečencov, meniť na ľudí, ktorí sú bez auta, bez finančných prostriedkov, bez jedla, bez vybavenia. Navyše tie rodiny rozdeľujú na ukrajinskej strane, to znamená, že mužov vracajú naspäť na Ukrajinu vlastne do boja. A sem prichádzajú matky s deťmi.
Now, some were forced to walk many kilometers through the night, while others fled by train, car or bus. Now, a few of the refugees were greeted by waiting relatives and friends. Others headed on towards the homeless centers.
They come into our country and they kill our people and destroyed our towns, cities and buildings, everything. So we are angry.
Now in Hungary, volunteers formed a human chain to move essential goods from trucks into a storage house. Civil organizations are collecting food and medicines for the refugees fleeing the Russian invasion. Families have been uprooted and split as they prepare to face a future of uncertainties. There are thousands of such Ukrainians. As the invasion unfolds, the humanitarian cost will only rise. Now, Finland has become the latest country to close its airspace for Russian carriers. Before this, Russia closed its airspace to flights operated by carriers from Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia and Slovenia. This comes as a tit-for-tat move at a time when the country is invading Ukraine. Britain had banned Russian flagship carrier Aeroflot from flying in its airspace. Austria's national carrier, Austrian Airlines, has announced cancellation of flights to Russia for at least the next 7 days. Meanwhile, Bulgaria, Poland, Czech Republic, the Baltics, Germany, Slovenia have closed their airspace to Russian carriers. The step comes in response to Russian invasion of Ukraine. German airline Lufthansa has said that it was halting flights to Russia and will stop overflying for the country, for the next 7 days at least. The Ukrainian airspace has been closed to all civilian aircraft. The Eastern European countries are now monitoring their airspace carefully. Moldova, southwest of Ukraine, has banned commercial flights, while Belarus has said that civilian planes could no longer fly over part of its territory. Now, this map on your screens right now shows a total blackout of the Ukraine airspace. This is after a number of countries issued guidelines prohibiting their airlines from flying over Ukrainian airspace. The UN civil aviation body has also condemned violation of Ukraine's airspace. In a statement, the body said that the invasion violates Article 1 of the Chicago Convention, which established the ICAO as well as the rules of the airspace rights in air travel and security. The International Civil Aviation Organization Council has 36 member states. The Council has urged Russia to cease its unlawful activities to ensure the safety and security of civil aviation in all affected areas. It also called upon Russia to respect its obligations under international air laws. The ICAO is not a global regulator and does not have the power to impose sanctions. It is a forum for states to set international aviation standards. Now, in an attempt to counter Russian troops in Ukraine, US President Joe Biden signed an order to provide $350 million in military aid to Kyiv. Now, this development comes as Russia forces continue to march towards the Ukrainian capital and overthrow the Zelensky government. This aid will also include Javelin anti-tank weapons. This is the third time that Biden has used his presidential authority to send emergency security assistance from US stockpiles to Ukraine. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, meanwhile, has said that his country will provide lethal aid to Ukraine through NATO partners to support its troops in this fight against the Russian military.
We are already providing significant support in terms of non-lethal aid, but I've just spoken with the Defence Minister and we'll be seeking to provide whatever support we can for lethal aid through our NATO partners, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, and we'll be working through those channels because that's the most effective way to do it. They are already providing support in these areas and we will be assisting them with what they are doing.
Other countries, including Germany, have also announced the decision to provide military assistance to Kiev, while France has pledged to send more equipment as well as fuel to Ukraine to help fight off the Russian invasion. Our next report gets you all the details.
President Joe Biden on Friday instructed the U.S. State Department to release up to an additional $350 million worth of weapons from U.S. stocks to Ukraine as the country struggles to push back a Russian invasion. In a memorandum to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Biden directed that $350 million allocated through the Foreign Assistance Act be designated for Ukraine's defense. This marks the third time that the United States has drawn from its weapons to supply Ukraine, after doing so in the fall of 2021 and then again in December. Blinken on Saturday called the third authorization unprecedented. Over the past year, the United States has committed more than $1 billion to security assistance to Ukraine, Blinken said. Ukraine has been asking for Javelin anti-tank weapons and Stinger missiles to shoot down aircraft. Other nations have pledged military material to Kyiv as Ukraine's military fights against an invading Russian force. The Netherlands will supply 200 Stinger air defense rockets, while Belgium has pledged 2,000 machine guns and 3,800 tons of fuel. France has decided to send defensive military equipment, while adding that the issue of sending offensive arms was still under consideration.
And with that, we call to wrap on this bulletin. News and updates continue on the other side on Beyond World is One. To stay tuned.
गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक।
गो मैकेनिक।
अरे गया नहीं अभी तक? गाड़ी की सर्विस कब से ड्यू है यार? ये थोड़ी जाएंगे कहीं, ये तो गाड़ी की सर्विस करवाने के लिए कहीं जाने की जरूरत नहीं है। चिल, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं है। गो मैकेनिक पर पाए एक्सपर्ट कार सर्विसेज, 50 पॉइंट इंस्पेक्शन और 3 महीने की अनकंडीशनल वारंटी। डाउनलोड करें इंडिया का नंबर 1 कार सर्विसेज ऐप गो मैकेनिक।
गो मैकेनिक।
Joe Biden, now the 46th president of the United States, has a full plate in front of him.
Afghanistan has been the heart of American military power.
In a clear warning to China, India's military has now taken control of the country for 1 year.
It says that it's likely to miss by now.
What was happening inside the virology lab in Wuhan?
One ship was able to freeze global trade.
We want love, we want peace, we want equality!
There are a traditional recipe, and it's really very delicious.
It's code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening. Wildfires, floods, and hurricanes. Extreme climate events warn of impending doom. Is the world heading towards a climate catastrophe? Watch WION's Climate Tracker weekdays at 12 p.m. GMT, 5:30 p.m. IST.
You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. You don't know how to bring the salmon back up a dead stream. You don't know how to bring back an animal now extinct. And you can't bring back the forest now in the desert.
Welcome back to WION World is One. Thank you so much for staying with us. My name is Hem Korsura. Let's just take a look at all the headlines that we're tracking this hour. Russian President Vladimir Putin addresses special forces and thanks them for fulfilling what he calls their heroic duty in Ukraine. Ukraine rejects Russia's offer to hold talks in Belarus, citing that Minsk itself is complicit in Russian invasion. But President Zelensky has left the door open for negotiations in other locations.
they're targeting military airports around the city. And they were trying to capture Hostomel airport north of the city.
Ukrainian parliament member confirms to WION that Russia is trying to infiltrate Kiev from all sides and trying to capture Kiev's airport to aid troop movement. Ukrainian officials report Russian troops have breached the walls and entered the city of Kharkiv. According to reports, Ukrainian forces are battling Russian troops on the streets of Ukraine's northeastern city. Moscow claims to have besieged two big cities in Ukraine. Russia claims it has entirely besieged Kherson and Versansk in southern regions of Ukraine. Western allies announced new set of economic sanctions against Russia. Europe will remove certain Russian banks from the SWIFT interbank system. European Union mulls additional sanctions against Russia. European Union Finance Minister to discuss a bloc-wide ban on Russian flights could be a part of a fresh package of sanctions on Moscow. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked another migrant crisis. According to United Nations, over 5 million Ukrainians could flee across the border into European Union nations. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians, mostly women and children, have already crossed over. More in our next report.
Ukrainian women and children fled their country on foot, in cars, and by ferry on Friday as Russian missiles pounded the capital, Kiev. Many had to leave behind brothers, husbands, and sons under new orders for men aged 18 to 60 to stay and fight.
There is a bombing everywhere and people are afraid and scared. So we want to leave Ukraine right now, but I think that there is no possibility for men to leave. So we need to decide. I have a 5-year-old kid and I have also my sister who has 2 kids. So we are really scared and don't know what will happen here.
Long lines of cars were jammed along the border to Romania, with many waiting for hours to reach the checkpoints.
It's a terrible tragedy and Putin is a crazy person. I have relatives in Russia as well and they are just thinking that it's not military action, but it's something like saving Russians from someone in Ukraine. So it's really sad how people don't know what's happening.
This ferry service usually takes about 20 cars from Ukraine to Romania per journey, but saw the number tripled as people fled. Tens of thousands of people poured into Romania, Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia on Friday. Authorities in Romania and Poland have lifted pandemic quarantine rules for those arriving from outside the EU, and from Friday, Ukrainians could get COVID-19 vaccinations in Poland. The border congestion was also seen at the Polish town of Medyka. Some already in Poland waited anxiously for loved ones to arrive, like Andriy, who hoped his family would make it soon.
Travel is very hard, of course. A lot of cars, a lot of buses, traffic jam. And then a big price to get here. And I hope 2, maybe 3 hours and they will come here. I think I will cry.
UN aid agencies say the war could drive up to 5 million people to flee abroad, with up to 3 million heading to Poland alone.
Now from London to New York, Paris to Vienna, thousands of people took to the streets on Saturday to condemn Russia's growing military aggression on Ukraine. Demonstrations ranged from loud protests to symbolic ones. Starting with New York, protesters gathered in Times Square to protest Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Demonstrators held anti-Putin slogans to denounce Moscow of its military maneuvers in Eastern Europe.
повернется одинаково за россияне, за украинцев. Слава Украине!
We are Ukrainians living in New York, and we are desperate to ask people to help Ukraine to fight, because they are just alone. They're supporting, but actually not supporting. We want real support country, because they are weak, it's a small country, we never wanted war, and we have our relatives, our mothers, children and grandchildren there.
Meanwhile, in London, hundreds of demonstrators rallied outside the Russian embassy to condemn Moscow's military attack. Protesters chanted pro-Ukraine slogans and waved Ukrainian flags to express their solidarity with the country. In the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, thousands of protesters hit the streets of the capital city to support Ukraine as fighting continued across the country. Georgia, like Ukraine, is also facing a Russia-backed separatist movement. The separatist movement was intensified following a brief war with Russia in 2008. Moscow-backed forces have since held the Georgian regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia.
I'm here to support Ukraine and their people who are right now fighting a war versus Vladimir Putin and versus Russia. And secondly, I'm going to protest the regime of Vladimir Putin and Russia. I want the Ukrainians to know that we are here. All of these people are with them. And Slava Ukraini.
Meanwhile, thousands of protesters marched through Vienna on Saturday to demonstrate against Russia's attack on Ukraine. Protesters demanded an end to Russia's military assault and immediate ceasefire. The demonstration in the Austrian capital coincided with other shows of solidarity for Ukraine in other European cities like London and Berlin. In France, hundreds of people took to the streets of Paris to show their support for Ukraine. Demonstrators gathered in the French capital's Republic Square waving flags and banners. The protest came as Russian troops closed in on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, as a number of skirmishes were reported across the country. In Israel, thousands of protesters flocked to Abima Square in central Tel Aviv on Saturday to condemn the Russian attack. According to reports, about 10,000 protesters joined the protests, which were organized by a group called Israeli Friends of Ukraine. It was one of the largest protests since the beginning of the invasion. Meanwhile, dozens of protesters dressed in bridal costumes gathered outside the Russian embassy in Mexico City on Saturday to call out against Putin's military actions. They held Ukrainian flags and other signs to show their solidarity with the nation. As Russian troops continue to unleash their assault on Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, the West is ramping up measures to impose more sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy. In the latest, Western allies have now agreed on a new list of financial sanctions against Moscow. European Union has proposed banishing a number of Russian banks from the SWIFT interbank system. With this, the West will ensure that these Russian banks are disconnected from the international financial system. The allies have also agreed to impose restrictive measures to prevent the Russian central bank from deploying in its international reserves. Adding on to this, affluent Russians connected to Putin's government will also no longer be allowed to use the golden passport system to obtain European citizenship. Speaking in Brussels, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said EU and other Western powers, including the United States and UK, are aiming to cripple Vladimir Putin's war machine.
As Russian forces unleash their assault on Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, we are resolved to continue imposing massive costs on Russia, costs that will further isolate Russia from the international financial system and our economies. In coordination with President Biden, President Macron, Bundeskanzler Scholz and Prime Minister Draghi, as well as Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Johnson, we considered a significant tightening of our international response. The European Union and its partners are working to cripple Putin's ability to finance his war machine.
French naval troops, meanwhile, have intercepted a Russia-bound cargo vessel in the Channel immediately after EU approved these new set of sanctions. The Russian-flagged Baltic leader, which had set sail from the French city, was escorted to the port of Boulogne-sur-Mer by French forces. It is suspected to belong to a company targeted by EU sanctions. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, meanwhile, has said that Moscow is taking immediate measures to mitigate the damage from the West-imposed sanctions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, has welcomed the move to disconnect Russia from the global financial system and has also urged Secretary General Antonio Guterres to strip Russia of its vote at the UN Security Council as punishment for invading Ukraine.
Наші дипломати боролися цілодобово і натхненно за те, щоб усі країни Європи погодили дуже сильне і справедливе рішення відключити Росію від міжнародної міжбанківської мережі. Маємо і цю важливу перемогу. Це мільярди і мільярди збитків для Росії. Конкретна ціна за це підле вторгнення в нашу державу.
This comes a day after Russia used its veto power against a UN Security Council resolution that sought to condemn its invasion of Ukraine. The United Nations Security Council has now said that it will vote to call for a rare emergency session of the UNGA. The vote by the 15-member council is procedural. None of the 5 permanent council members, that is Russia, China, France, Britain and the United States, can use their veto powers. Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers will also hold emergency talks later today. This is in response to the urgent calls by Zelensky, who has asked for immediate military assistance from his Western allies. Top diplomats in G7 nations will also hold a special conference to discuss the latest developments in Ukraine. Now, in an attempt to counter Russian troops in Ukraine, US President Joe Biden has signed an order to provide $350 million in military aid to Kiev. The development comes as Russian forces continue to march forward towards the capital and overthrow the Zelensky government. The aid will also include Javelin anti-tank weapons. This is the third time that Biden has used his presidential authority to send emergency security assistance. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, meanwhile, has said that his country will provide lethal aid to Ukraine through NATO partners to support its troops and fight against the Russian military.
We are already providing significant support in terms of non-lethal aid, but I've just spoken with the Defence Minister and we'll be seeking to provide whatever support we can for lethal aid through our NATO partners, particularly the United States and the United Kingdom, and we'll be working through those channels because that's the most effective way to do it. They are already providing support in these areas and we will be assisting them with what they are doing.
Other countries, including Germany, have also announced decision to provide military assistance to Kiev, while France has pledged to send more military equipment as well as fuel to Ukraine to help fight out the Russian invasion. Our next report gets you all the details. Take a look.
President Joe Biden on Friday instructed the U.S. State Department to release up to an additional $350 million worth of weapons from U.S. stocks to Ukraine as the country struggles to push back a Russian invasion. In a memorandum to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Biden directed that $350 million allocated through the Foreign Assistance Act be designated for Ukraine's defense. This marks the third time that the United States has drawn from its weapons to supply Ukraine, after doing so in the fall of 2021 and then again in December. Blinken on Saturday called the third authorization unprecedented. Over the past year, the United States has committed more than $1 billion to security assistance to Ukraine, Blinken said. Ukraine has been asking for Javelin anti-tank weapons and Stinger missiles to shoot down aircraft. Other nations have pledged military material to Kyiv, as Ukraine's military fights against an invading Russian force. The Netherlands will supply 200 Stinger air defense rockets, while Belgium has pledged 2,000 machine guns and 3,800 tons of fuel. France has decided to send defensive military equipment, while adding that the issue of sending offensive arms was still under consideration.
Residents of Kiev are facing their worst nightmare. Russian forces are carrying out an all-out offensive in the capital city. Helpless parents with their children are seeking refuge. A Catholic church in Kiev became a shelter for 27 children and their mothers. Unaware of the war that rages outside, while children play inside the church, their parents fear for the future. Take a look.
Ви куди? Наверх чи наниз? А знизу хтось є? Що ви? Нормально все? Чуть-чуть. Ну, стойте.
And Hollywood celebrities are reacting to this escalating crisis in Ukraine. While some have unequivocally condemned Russia, others are praying for peace to prevail on both sides. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Prince William and Kate Middleton, said that they stand with the people of Ukraine as they bravely fight the invasion by Russia. This is a rare public comment for the British royals on political issues like this. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle also called for global support. The couple had earlier issued a statement that they stand in solidarity with the Ukrainians. Oscar-winning actress Angelina Jolie shared a video from the Ukrainian borders as people fled the country in wake of the Russian invasion. The actress said that her focus will be to ensure basic human right protection for the refugees. Marvel star Ryan Reynolds and Mark Ruffalo have shared their concerns for the refugees too. The Deadpool star urged his fans to donate for the millions of refugees who are currently displaced. Avengers star Mark Ruffalo, who is well known for being vocal about global issues, also sent his thoughts and prayers to the victims of war. Stars of Ukrainian descent Vera Farmiga, Catherine Winnick, Olga Kurilenko were among those reacting on social media to Putin's military operation in Ukraine. Each of them condemned Russia and some of them even quoted the country's national anthem. Earlier, Priyanka Chopra had also reacted to the crisis, calling the situation terrifying, shared her concerns for all those who are suffering from this catastrophic war. The UNICEF ambassador is helping the organization raise funds to help 7.5 million children in Ukraine. And the most active response has come from the Oscar-winning actor Sean Penn, who is presently in Ukraine shooting a documentary of everything that the country is going through. Club World Champions and Champions League holders Chelsea face Liverpool tonight in the final of the EFL Cup. In the club in turmoil, owner Roman Abramovich has attempted to distance the club from the backlash over Russia's invasion of Ukraine by relinquishing day-to-day control. Now, Abramovich is one of Russia's wealthiest individuals and has been considered close to Russian President Vladimir Putin. There have been calls from British politicians to Abramovich to be sanctioned as part of the measures that have been adopted by the British government in response to the invasion of Ukraine. In what is being seen as a move to preempt any problems for the club, Abramovich has handed over the stewardship and care of Chelsea to trustees of the club's charitable trust. In a statement that did not reference the invasion of Ukraine, Abramovich said the decision was keeping in mind the best interests of the club. Chelsea are not for sale, and the $2 billion loan given to the club by Abramovich is not being called in here. Abramovich bought Chelsea in 2004, and his investment has seen the club win 2 Champions League titles, 5 Premier League titles, FA Cup, 5 FA Cups, the Europa League twice, and a maiden Club World Cup title last month.
Champions League winners, Bruce at Manchester City.
And with that, we call to wrap on this edition of the News Bulletin. News and updates continue on the other side on Beyond World is One. Stay tuned.